So what I'll do first is I'm going to have the individuals say their name, but not talk about their job just yet. But you might not know, for example, what United Technologies or BASF does. So I'm just going to have them give a brief description of their company. Comcast we probably know, but if Katie wants to say a little bit, she can as well. But why don't you start us off? Thanks.
Sure. So my name is Ross Angle. I work for United Technologies. United Technologies is a very large and global company. We have over 200,000 employees worldwide, and we do over 60 billion in revenues. When you think about the overall business, you might not recognize the name United Technologies, but we have a lot of products that you would recognize. So on the aerospace side of the house, we have Pratt & Whitney jet engines. We have Sikorsky helicopters, which is very known for manufacturing the Black Hawk for the military. We also have a recent acquisition of Goodrich, which was about an $18 billion acquisition that started a few years back and is now consolidated into Hamilton Sundstrand. It does a lot of the different components for the aerospace industry. We, on the commercial side of the house, we have Otis Elevator, one of the largest manufacturers of elevators in the world. And we also have Carrier Air Conditioning, which does HVAC for residential and businesses. And then the other big component is for fire and security.
Thanks.
My name is Dave Goad. I'm with FTI Consulting. I'm in a 2010 Villanova grad. I graduated with 2 degrees in finance and accounting. I think if there's programs in front of you, the bio there for FTI is Mark Lauber. I'm a last-minute replacement, but he looks a lot more impressive than me anyway. So I guess a word on FTI. FTI is a global consulting firm. We have about, I think, over 4,000 employees now, offices across the globe. I am here from our New York office, and I'm in the corporate finance restructuring practice. We have different groups, things like technology consulting. We have an economic consulting group, a group that is kind of akin to forensic accounting. Corporate finance does a few different things. I'm in restructuring, like I said, so we work with distressed companies, bankrupt companies, stuff like that. One of my colleagues is here tonight, and she'll be outside for the reception later. Maybe Kelly. Megan is in our TMT group. That's technology, media, and telecommunications. And Megan's group, in addition to restructuring type services, also provides other advisory services like M&A type stuff and things of that nature.
Great, thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Moore. I've been one of Charlesburg Comcast. I guess I'll give you a little bit of background anyway, not too much. So we are based here, headquartered in Philadelphia. We obviously have 2 large groups. We have our cable side of the business, as well as NBC Universal, which everyone here probably knows we own at this point. We do over about 60 billion in revenue as well. We have about 120,000 employees worldwide, including overseas, which our cable business is domestic. However, we have NBCU is definitely overseas. I personally work at Comcast Spotlight. I'll tell you a little bit about what Comcast Spotlight is, because I'm not sure anyone in the room. A lot of times people think Searchlight and the Guide, or they're not really sure what Spotlight is, but we're the advertising arm of Comcast. So what happens when we negotiate what's called affiliate agreements with programmers, right? So we have to then go negotiate with the TNT, or we have to negotiate with our own NBCU channels to air them so our Comcast cable customers can actually see those networks. We actually get advertising rights as part of those negotiations. So we get about 2 minutes per hour that we get to sell. So those ads are seen by our Comcast customers. So it's everything from like the cheesy car commercials that you'll see, because we can geo-target like national networks, all the way up to sort of more national advertisers that just want to geo-target. So that's the group that I work in.
Great, thanks.
Hi, I'm Melissa Megulero, go by Mel, and I graduated from here in the class of 2012 and went straight into working for BASF. So how many of you guys know who BASF is by show of hands? Good, me neither. I didn't know who they were until I started working with them, so don't worry, you're not alone. So BASF is the largest chemical company in the world. And I think when people think of chemicals, they don't realize how many industries chemicals actually touch. So We have an agricultural division where we make chemicals that help produce food, help food maximize yield. We also make plastic. We make types of plastic that go into Nike shoes. So, and think of your household cleaning items, so things like Windex, we make the chemicals that go into Windex. We're basically a raw material provider to a lot of the companies that you guys purchase products from all the time. So the past group that I've been working in, they're more heavily automobile focused. So we make a lot of the stuff that goes into paint that goes on cars, but we also make catalytic converters. So we make a solution that coats catalytic converters, and when a car basically emits things into the air, it's our chemistry that stops all those bad pollutants from entering the air. So it's not just the chemicals that I think people sometimes get a bad stigma about, but it's a lot of using chemistry to make the world a more sustainable place going forward.
Great, thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Noto. I'm a Villanova alum as well, 2008. I work for JP Morgan Chase, which is one of the largest financial institutions in the world. We do everything from investment banking to credit cards to mortgages. I personally work on the retail credit card space. And right now I'm looking at kind of the fraud and disputes world. For instance, if you were to look on your credit card statement and see an item that you didn't recognize, how that whole process works from getting that item removed and things of that nature. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Again, I just wanted to make sure you had some familiarity with the companies, but everybody's individual careers, they can just be vastly different. Perhaps you've heard of Jack Welch, probably one of the better known CEOs of our time, and he started at General Electric as an accounts receivable clerk. And I don't think there's too many other CEOs that started as accounts receivable clerks, but your careers can grow in a variety of directions. We're going to focus primarily on what these individuals do, but they can clearly answer questions about other possibilities and that kind of thing. So I'm going to go back through the panel again, and I'm going to switch the order and go back to our JP Morgan rep, for example, because that's a huge business as well. And he can talk about, I think he gave you a hint that he was in the credit card side of things. And just to talk a little bit about, you know, a day might not be right, but sort of like it within a month, the types of things that you end up doing, if that is sort of a representative sample of what you do.
Sure, so within a month I'll probably take some time learning the area of credit cards that I'm looking at, because most people think that everything within a credit card is pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. So I'll take a look at kind of the systems they're using, what kind of regulatory focuses are going on, and then meet with my stakeholders to figure out their business and their concerns, and then kind of go through the audit process to see where there are issues or items of concern, and as I go through that process, kind of issue an audit report with either a clean audit rating or a needs improvement audit rating that will kind of affect their business.
Okay, so I'm in a rotational program at BASF, and every month has been drastically different. But I would say that, so I'll talk about my most recent rotation. I've been working in controlling, and in the German company type of word, controlling is really finance. So in this role, I would say on a monthly basis, what I took on as projects in this 4-month assignment were related to intercompany transfer pricing modeling. So we sell things between some of our own businesses, and I was directed to come up with some sort of pricing model that we were doing related to this. And also R&D inventory controls. So we have really high value precious metal. We have a precious metal trading floor, and we use a lot of precious metal throughout some of the things that we do. So I would go into the lab and I would do counts. So I never in my accounting classes thought that I would be in a lab coat wearing all sorts of safety procedure stuff, walking through the labs on a regular basis. But a lot of the stuff that I do throughout the month is related to those two projects. So I get a lot of questions from different groups that are handling inventory, and I also take a lot of questions on the pricing side too.
All right, it's my turn. I like being in the middle that way. I'm sure you're going to switch it up. So like I said, I work at Comcast Spotlight. So I work on a team that supports our national and HQ sales teams. We are sort of the strategy / business development arm, finance support, like I said, of the for the sales team. So we'll do everything from various like pricing models and analysis, to supporting any new initiatives, especially when it comes to what you might hear this like coin term of advanced advertising. Advanced advertising encompasses a bunch of different things in the ad world, including what we call linear addressable, which would be, you see a specific ad to your set-top box based upon, your demographics. So if you're a female that makes over 100,000 that is looking to buy a car, you will get a different advertisement than a male college student that's looking to buy a car, right? Because you might be different cars that we would target specifically to you. So there's a bunch of things that we're working on, like linear addressable, that's just one example of what we're calling advanced advertising. So we do, like I said, a lot of the strategy, a lot of the pricing models, a lot of working with other groups and the technical teams to get the products in place and ready for sale.
All right. So, like I said earlier, I'm in the restructuring group at FTI, and in an entry-level role in our group, you are basically a generalist. And so I've worked on anything from really, I guess, 2 to 4 projects at a time. Each of those projects are in different industries. So by way of example, right now, my largest project is a single asset power plant. I've also worked on companies in the telecommunications sector, grocery retail sector, but the power plant, right now our clients are secured lenders to the power plant. So they've lent about $200 million to finance the construction and ongoing operations of this power plant. And the power plant doesn't generate sufficient cash flow to pay for operations and pay its debt. And so our client group is foreclosing on the asset, and we are the financial advisor and helping them through that process. And so on a day-to-day basis, I would kind of break what I do down into probably really 4 things. Number 1 is Excel modeling, financial modeling, both reacting to financial modeling that has already been done and creating my own in Excel. Number 2, preparing client reports, and that's really at the junior level, working in PowerPoint and drafting reports on our findings to our clients. Number 3 is just being on the phone. We work very closely with a lot of attorneys, and then on the phone a lot with people internally and then clients. And I'm about 4 years out now, and as each year progresses, what I do turns more and more into dealing with clients and other external parties. When I first started, it was more focused on kind of the doing stuff in Excel and preparing PowerPoint presentations. And the 4th thing I do is really reading, and that's reading financial documents, SEC filings, things like 10Ks, 10Qs, and then things that are specific to the project that I'm working on. Whether that's industry materials or other specific things to that project.
So currently, I work at Sikorsky Aircraft, which is a helicopter business within UTC. I'm currently the CFO of the operations business for the commercial side. On a monthly basis, I would say this is probably the most dynamic and challenging role that I've had so far in UTC. But on a monthly basis, I work with supply chain management to understand when's the material coming in to build the aircraft, what are the different challenges that we might have with the various suppliers that we're using. I spend a lot of time with the operations group, so looking at the operations of the house and measuring productivity out the floor, trying to understand, how much is it costing us to build an aircraft, where is the, overall cost structure too high in the overall business, and how can we drive that down to get a lower overhead rate to drive a more competitive product. I spend a lot of time on the FP&A side of the house, so that's the financial planning and analysis side of the house, where we're taking a look at the current month plan, the full year plan, and setting objectives even 5 years out into the future. I also spend a lot of time on the month-end close, so consolidating the financials, working with the consolidations group, financial reporting group, to understand the various accounting, different types of accounting impacts that we might have for the month that we were expecting or weren't expecting. So right now, I'm working really with all aspects of finance, I would say, from a corporation perspective. So It's been a lot of fun, and it's definitely a very challenging environment, but operations is a great place to be because you can really kind of get down there and see the product at the end of the day. So.
Great. I might just provide a quick synopsis, not of what they said, but these are accounting and finance majors by and large, and I heard regulatory mentioned, I heard systems, I heard audit, I heard lab coats and R&D, I heard marketing and advertising, I heard supply chain, I probably heard more that I didn't get it all down. I just want to say, when you're in a business, you're in a business. I mean, your specialty is accounting, finance, if you will, but it's the business, and you deal with all parts of the business. I think, you know, they can all say that with certainty. Could you guys talk about your first couple of years and rotation programs, if you have them, training, and if you've been there a little bit longer, was there any formal training? I know there's always on-the-job learnings, if you will, but was there any formal training at a 5 or 10 year mark, just to give them an idea of that kind of thing? We could go in any order, but I'll start with you, but if anybody wants to chime in, fire away.
So I graduated from the University of Connecticut in 2004, and I joined the Financial Leadership Program for United Technologies, which is just a great program, and it's a lot of fun. In the first 2 years, you will basically go into 4 different roles, and you get to apply for each of the roles. And I think what's really great about the overall program is that there's roles in a variety of the different businesses within the overall organization. So you can go and work in Otis Elevator in financial planning, then you can take an operations role in Pratt & Whitney or Sikorsky Aircraft. You get to see both the aerospace side of the house and the commercial side of the house. I was also lucky enough to take a role in internal audit in Paris, France. So for me, I graduated college, I had never taken kind of one of those international assignments, always wanted to. And I was really able to kind of go around, you know, different parts of Europe, Switzerland, Sweden, and see the different businesses and how they're run. So, you know, overall, I would say the first 2 years are probably the most fun 2 years. And then it gets, you know, it becomes more and more challenging. And I think the best part is that you pick up the different technical skills along the way, but what really kind of stands out as you kind of, you know, move up the ladder within your organizations is really the softer skills, so the leadership skills, the presentation skills, you know, just understanding the overall dynamic within the business and directionally where the business is heading.
Great. So we don't have a rotational program per se at FTI, but as I was describing before, we have a bunch of different business units providing different types of advisory services. And you know, if you start in my group, for example, and you find yourself very interested in kind of technology, telecom type space, and you voice that opinion, then I think my group is very good about staffing you on assignments like those that you're interested in. You know, people have moved around quite a bit that I know from group to group, and geographically as well. You know, I've never done an international assignment, but you know, others in my group have done secondments in the London office. I heard somebody that went to, I think, our Hong Kong office for 3 months or 6 months. And so, you know, to summarize, not a formal rotation program, but you know, if you kind of voice your concerns and you know, you'd say, I'd like my career to be headed in this direction, I think folks at FTI are pretty open to that. And then I guess the second question was on training. So we do have formal training programs. You know, when I first started, I think I was in the office for 2 days, kind of learning how to use my computer and the systems, and you know, doing HR type training, and then was shipped off to a hotel for a week to do training to learn about the company, number one, and you know, my group and kind of technical skills, specifically number two. And then I've had periodic training since then. I think I had a training about a year in. I was promoted after about 2.5 years. I had another official week-long training after I was promoted. But all that being said, I would say that most of the learning, in my industry at least, is very much on the job. And you know, no matter what you do, I would recommend you kind of keep that in the back of your mind when you start. You learn a lot of very important skills that are very applicable in school, like the finance and accounting type technical stuff. But as you mentioned before, there's a lot of soft skills involved too, and most of those are really things I think you pick up on the job.
Great. All right, so I guess I'll quickly start with sort of how I started out. I graduated from Villanova in 2004, and I actually worked at Ernst & Young for 3 years before joining internal audit at Comcast. I had a great experience at EY. I learned a lot. I became, I feel like I grew as a professional, but I was sort of ready to learn the operations of the company and how it works and how it's run. And plus, the hours are pretty brutal. You'll find that whoever is an intern. But I started right at like Sarbanes-Oxley. It just came out. It was quite a time. Then I wanted to do anything but audit at the time. It's like, I will do anything. I talked to the recruiter. Just make sure it's not audit. And boy, was I wrong. Because when she said you have to, really interview at Comcast internal audit, it's a really great opportunity to get into a great company in the Philadelphia area. There's nowhere else, that you should really be focused on. You need to think about this. So I reluctantly agreed, and I went, and I really, loved the people that I interviewed with, and I ended up joining internal audit. So I was in internal audit for 3 years, and with internal audit with any large company, you get to do so much. Like I traveled to almost every major city that we're in. I audited cable systems. I audited corporate treasury, various different groups. And you get to learn the bit, almost like doing a rotation, not being in a rotational program. And then when I was ready to move into the business, I needed. And I was like, I need some more experience and exposure to operations and sort of how to run the business. So that's when I joined FMLP, which is our management level program, 3-year rotational program, financial management leadership program. So I went through that, and then, after 3 years, I ended up at Comcast Spotlight. So I've been at Spotlight for about a year now. It was one of my rotations. So, throughout my FMLP experience, though, I was able to work on the programming side of the house. I was there when the NBC deal closed, which was a really exciting time to be there. People don't realize that Comcast, we owned some cable networks before NBC, like Goth Channel, Style, E, Style doesn't exist anymore, G4, maybe not the best channels, if you think about it, Style and G4, right? But, so I did some programming stuff, and that was really exciting. I got to work at a cable region, and then I ended up at Comcast Spotlight because I really liked advertising and it was an opportunity. So I'm thinking we'll get to this, Dr. West, later, but there are more entry-level rotational programs. Like there's our internship program as well as what's called CORE, which is an entry-level program that somebody in the audience here might be interested in. So we're going to go into that into detail later. Or do you want me to give a background of that?
I will be asking about
Okay.
internships and then you can bring it up at that point.
Perfect.
Super.
All right. Okay, so like I said, I'm in the ASF's rotational program. They offer a lot of them. We recruit at Villanova primarily for accounting and controlling. So I'm in the accounting rotational program. It's a 2-year program, and between each of my rotations has been between 4 and 8 months. So I spent my first 8 months working in internal audit, which was a lot of fun. Like people have said before, lots of travel. I got to go to a lot of cool cities. I spent a month working in Europe. I was the only U.S. person on the team too, so every weekend I went to a different city because I was going to be there anyway, and it's kind of like my own mini Euro trip. So that was my first rotation. Then I went over into our corporate accounting department, which I was then the responsible accountant for North American derivatives. And that's where I was really grateful for my finance minor because I didn't expect to be doing something like that right away. But a lot of times our rotational program is driven by business needs. So you'll have 4 specific rotations that you filter through, and then whatever the business needs are within those rotations is kind of what you fill into. So there was a transition going on, and I happened to fill in that role until they found someone else to do it. So it was a lot of exposure. Learned a lot about some of the risks and how we hedge a lot of our risks based on them. So I did that for 4 months, and that's more of the month-end closing process and consolidation because BASF is this huge global company. And we have all these little sites, so we consolidate North America, and then North America gets consolidated into Germany because we're a German company. So it's the North American consolidation piece through those 4 months. Then I went down to Texas, and I worked at a production site. So my funny story about coming from accounting and finance and working at a production site is one day, I mean, this is a huge plant that we're talking about. And one day I'm driving into work and I can see this giant fire that looks like it's coming from 10 miles down the road. And in my head, I'm going, safety is a huge thing at BASF. So I'm going, oh gosh, like, do I keep driving? What do I do? I have no chemical engineering background, so I don't know exactly how all the chemistry works. But all I know is that there's potential for danger when you work at a production site. So I was like, all right, I think they would blockade the road if I couldn't keep going. So I get to work, my entire accounting team, no one's in the office, everyone's in meetings. I'm like, oh gosh. So I go into some random stranger's office and I say to him, it's like, excuse me, sir, I feel like I need to tell someone this. There's like a giant flame outside. It's like, oh, that's a flare. That's what goes off when there's some error in the production process. And instead of releasing harmful things into the air and causing a meltdown, it releases pressure out this flare, and that causes a fire. So there's lots of things that you learn in the process of all this too. But actually, working at a production site was really fun. My first 2 rotations were in North Jersey out of our headquarters, which is in Florham Park. But this rotation was in Texas. So I was working on the Gulf Coast and I packed up all my stuff. The company ships it all for you. Moved down to Texas for 8 months. And I had a blast. I mean, going along with the training lines, at the start of joining the ASF, you spend an entire week with all the different rotational programs. So it's usually a lot of students who are coming out of school. A lot of times first jobs unless they're into the MBA or some of the leadership programs. And so you meet all these people from engineering backgrounds, from IT backgrounds, accounting, finance, HR, you name it, they've got rotational programs for all of them. And then as you travel to all the different sites and you get relocated for these things, we kind of become a network for each other because they're all traveling at the same time too. So it made moving a lot easier because I at least had some other what we call PDPs in the area. PDP stands for Professional Development Program. And so when I got there, it was like instant friends. Everyone wanted to explore because we're all new to a region, and the people who are local are like, oh yeah, we'll show you what to do. So it was a lot of fun to be down there. And cost accounting is probably some of the most valuable experience that I've taken out of that, because if you can understand your product costs, you can really talk about a lot of things within a company. And I used a lot of that knowledge in my next rotation, which is where I currently am until tomorrow when I place out of the program. But yeah, so right now I work in Iselin, New Jersey, which is a little bit further south. It's about an hour and a half from here. And I work with the Catalyst Business Group. So catalysts are change agents, and we primarily create catalysts out of precious metal solution type of things. But in this unit is where I got more exposure to how a specific business runs instead of a function. So really, at the end of the day, what BASF's rotational program does is it shows you internal audit and controls. It shows you the monthly consolidation process through corporate accounting. It shows you the business unit perspective of what they're focusing on individually within each specific business unit. And then you also get to see cost accounting, so how a product is actually costed. So yeah, and then after that they give you a 1-year placement and you take that role, so you're guaranteed a job. It's not like you have to apply for anything afterwards. And then you can post for your own positions internally after it. So, yeah.
So for the program we're recruiting for, we don't have a rotational program per se, but it's a 2-year internal audit program. I think Katie mentioned it, that within internal audit, it's kind of a rotational program because every 6 weeks I'm looking at something new. So I'm based in Wilmington, Delaware, but I've only been there for about 14 or 15 months, but I've already traveled to places like Orlando, the West Coast, Illinois. And the great thing about it is that you build a network within our GANT program. And Lauren was a part of it, and they have meetings pretty much every week to go through how everybody's doing and what they're working on, and that makes it more of a rotational program. In terms of training, I think that's one place where we really excel. Whenever there's a new regulation, we'll have some cutting-edge training on that, and then there is some formalized training every year to kind of work on the soft skills, which I think is really strong about the program.
Great. As you can see, they've already, in 10 years and less in most cases, they've already done a lot of different things. Unlike if some of you perhaps are accounting majors and you're thinking public accounting, there's a pretty clear career path. I mean, you got to pick the industry you want to manage in, et cetera. But it turns out here, I'd like them to talk a little bit about mentoring, the importance of mentoring to you, or coaching, whatever phrase you want to use, and just some tips on managing your career and things, you know, it's just not automatic when you're in a especially a large corporation. So just talk a little bit about managing your career. We can go in any order you want, frankly.
So, you know, having a mentor is definitely one of the more critical aspects that you know that you really need to focus on when you join corporate America. In terms of networking, you know, developing a network within an organization really becomes a critical part of you being able to figure out how to kind of efficiently complete tasks. You're going back to those people for references and things that you're doing. You're doing you know, best practices. They're helping you to meet other people in the organization. You know, so within UTC, one of the great things that we do is we really try and focus on getting each of the employees within finance an executive mentor or manager. And that's really just to kind of help you first step out and build a relationship. One of the things that I've relied on within UTC, coming off the program, I ended up working in San Diego. I developed a really strong relationship with the executive of the plant there, of the operations plant there. And you know, at some point later on down the road, that's actually one of the reasons why I was able to move to Sikorsky. I also worked with with a consolidations manager there who moved to Otis Elevator. And when I think I had been there for about 3 years, and I was looking for another position, one of the positions back in Connecticut, because that's where I was originally from, I actually relied on that person to kind of help me find a position, and that's how I actually moved to Otis. So, you know, I continuously use my network within UTC, and I think, you know, you kind of use those networks to get feedback on some of the things that, you know, you're trying to accomplish within your career, some of your aspirations, your goals. One of the more key decisions that I made, and I'm still not sure how it went, but when I was working at Otis Elevator, I had worked with a man named Dave Gitlin, who was actually, you know, one of the presidents within UTAS, and he, it was during the Goodrich acquisition, but we didn't know the Goodrich acquisition was going on, and I was choosing between that role or the role that I had talked to with another executive, Steve Page, down in Sikorsky. So I ended up going the Sikorsky path, but at that point in my career, I really had two really strong opportunities. One kind of led me in FP&A operations path, and the other would have led me more down, you know, a strategic path, which would have, you know, focused on integration of the business and, you know, ensuring that the overall Goodrich acquisition went well. So, you know, it's funny, you know, the organization is really made up of people, so developing those relationships is really critical to you know, getting ahead and ensuring that you know, you have the support team that you need to be successful.
Yeah, I agree that mentoring is hugely important, you know, both, I think, formally and informally. So I guess I'll start with formally. At FTI, we have a mentor program where everybody's set up with a mentor from your first day. And most of the mentors are at least 10 years or so ahead of you. And that's important because they've kind of seen a lot. You know, they've seen it all by that point in time. And my mentor has helped me, you know, through kind of our internal review process, our staffing process, you know, understanding the business as a whole and things like that. But, you know, perhaps even more important, I think, is kind of the informal mentor process. And again, no matter what you guys do, I would highly recommend, you know, trying to really shadow somebody who's maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of you. And, you know, I did that at FTI, and that was hugely invaluable because, you know, from day one, what you're going to be doing in the job is very different from being a student. Like I said before, you learn a lot that you'll be able to apply, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to be new to you. And, you know, if anyone in this room has done an internship, you've probably seen those types of things already. And I think it's very important to have somebody who's just a couple years older than you who can still sort of speak the language. And that would be it has been hugely valuable for me, and I'm sure will be very valuable for you as well. And then in terms of, I guess, kind of the bigger picture of managing your career, I guess kind of piggyback off what Ross was saying about how network is extremely important. And the older you get, the more senior you get, the more it really is about who you know. And we have our top position in my group is called the Senior Managing Director. One of our SMDs always gives a speech to our first years about how you're creating your first network now. And I'd even go a step further than that and say you're creating your first network now here in college. And it's very important to keep in touch with those people. And it might not seem formal to just go grab a beer with somebody after work, but you never know where that person's going to be 10 years down the road, and they could help you win a new engagement. They could help you find a new job. And so I think it's sometimes hard at a very junior level when your job is really, in most cases, I think about getting work done, to kind of take a step back and view the bigger picture of making sure that you're networking and making contacts, and keeping up with your friendships and your networking connections. And so I think that's really one of the most important things you can do, I think, in your career.
Katie referred to FMLP a little bit ago, and I was one of the professors that taught in that program. It actually wasn't one thing I said. I happened to be with another person who was a lawyer speaking one day, and he gave a piece of advice I just thought was fantastic. He looked at Katie and the others and he said, how many would invest $10 in their career? And of course everybody said, yeah. He said, take some manager to lunch. You just mentioned a beer, for example. Everybody's got to eat lunch. Nobody's going to turn down lunch and say, I just want to know what you do in marketing. Or it doesn't have to be your manager. Take some manager. Or if you know what your next rotation is going to be, take a middle manager or something. Just say, hey, I just want to pick your brain, see what you do, and give me some ins and outs. That's for $10. It's a great investment, in my opinion. So I thought that was a clever piece of advice that somebody gave.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So, talking about mentorship, right? I think that's an intimidating part. Because everyone's saying, so you need to have a mentor. Where the heck do you get a mentor, right? Who's this mentor? Is it just going to appear? And it can't just be anybody. It's got to be somebody that you value their opinion. Now, there's a formal mentors, right? So, at Comcast, if you join, our internship program or CORE or SMLP, you're always assigned a mentor. And it's usually at a level that's relevant to you. So if you're an intern, it's probably somebody that's a couple of years ahead of you. Your CORE, maybe it's a manager level. And if you're an FMLP, it's an executive. So you get somebody that really helps you, make decisions about your career, and you can ask questions to, and you feel comfortable talking to. So I think that's great, because being assigned a mentor takes a lot of pressure off of going to seek, right? Is there I don't know if there's a match website for mentors like the dating one these days, but I don't think that there is, right? But then there's the whole, Professor West is saying, you can go find your mentors too. And if there's somebody that you're interested in. I joined a formal mentorship program through what's called WIC, which is a women's program in cable. And I was going to get assigned somebody, and I went to the person and I said, I specifically want this executive to be my mentor. And she's like, well, they're not signed up for the program, but let me see and call and ask. And they went and called and asked and said, hey, somebody that's really interested in being your mentee, are you interested in doing the program? And finally convinced her. And she didn't want to do it because she was too busy. Now we have the best relationship. Which goes to my next thing is managing your own career. Managing your career is about managing your own career. It sounds silly, but nobody's going to do it but you. It's up to you to do it. I think people even get complacent. You join these programs and things, and you want these companies are going to sort of help you move along, but it's not their responsibility or anybody else's responsibility, but yours to really make the decisions and talk to the people or network or whatever you need to do to sort of get ahead and work hard. It's really your own responsibility. I think, like I said, sometimes you can get complacent, sort of just following along, but it's just important to remember.
I think that's a great point. So at BASF, when you first start, you're assigned usually a VP level mentor and then also a peer mentor. So you'll have someone who's pretty close to you, at least in terms of age or coming into the program, someone who may currently still be in the program or just recently placed out. So when you have little questions, it's a lot easier to ask a peer mentor. But when you have career-based questions, I've always gone to my VP mentor. And it's really nice that we have this kind of structure, even though it might not necessarily be someone you chose. I mean, I have informal mentors too, but BASF has a talent management meeting every, I think it's once a year or twice a year, where all these managers at a high up level come into a room and they sit down and they talk specifically about talent and talent within the organization and career moves that would make sense for individuals. But you know, when you put all these people together, it's like, oh, I have a need here and this would fill this person or fill this person's needs. And so the fact that they have that, you kind of need someone higher up who's out there saying, hey, put this person forward. Like, I want to push this person into that role. This would be a good fit for them. So I'm glad we have both sides of that. And then going along with what Katie said, I mean, driving your own career, it's not like these mentors are going to stand up for you or say, put your name forth if you don't make time to meet with them and to keep them updated about things. And they don't have to be the person that you're assigned to. Anyone in that room who's at that level can stand up and say, hey, I've worked with that person, or have you thought of this person for that role? So it's not always the formal method that's the best method, but at least you have that opportunity where it's not like you have to necessarily seek someone out for a mentorship. You'll be assigned someone, but you're more than welcome to do and go and have informal mentorships too. And I know I have some informal mentors, and I'm very close to my formal mentor. So it's really what you make of it.
So at JP Morgan, you get assigned a coach, which is someone anywhere between 3 and 5 years out of the program, who you'll meet with on a weekly basis just to talk through job responsibilities, to vent, or just to kind of shoot the breeze, to kind of make you feel more comfortable within the organization. And also, your manager usually will set up at least a monthly touch point where they'll come to you and go through how your day's going. And I think it's already been mentioned, but I think you do have to own your career and kind of figure out who your mentors are and who to build relationships with. Also, value relationships now at Villanova. When I was leading public accounting, the person who hired me was someone who I had met at Villanova while I was there and had built a friendship with, who was 2 years ahead of me. So just make sure that you keep that network once you leave school. So I think that's really important to do.
I have a real quick question for all of you. It could be a sentence or whatever. Is something like a CPA, a CMA, or other professional designations valued or expected at your companies?
I would say at UTC it's very valued, CPA and MBA. I think you'll see a lot of the different various employees going for some sort of a certificate or to become certified. In the financial leadership program, there is a program to become a CPA. So through your 2 years, working with other CPAs, you can then go and actually apply for the test. So they do have a path in the curriculum to help those who have an accounting background, join UTC, still get a CPA, and not have to go to a public firm. But I think what it shows is that the person's willing to put in the time and the effort to become certified or to get their MBA. And then it also gives them some strength compared to maybe some others from a technical perspective. Now, I've seen a lot of people, and there are a lot of executives without CPAs or MBAs, but a lot of times, at some point in your career, UTC will send you back to school to get an MBA.
Okay.
I would say that in my group at FTI, CPA, CFA, and MBA are all helpful, certainly, but not expected. In my group, you find that a lot of more senior people are CPAs because my practice is a legacy Big Four practice, actually. And the junior people, not as much. The junior people, more folks go after the CFA, which is certainly, again, helpful to have at the junior level because, if you can understand the material on the CFA exam, that's helpful in the day-to-day job. And then at a more senior level, when you're really trying to sell work and bring in clients, it's helpful to have, I think, any of those letters on your resume.
It's definitely valued, but not necessary for a finance path. I guess if you wanted to be higher up in an accounting path, you would definitely have to have your CPA. But, a graduate degree, like I said, it's valued, but by no means necessary, especially for, our entry-level core rotational program. I mean, you could go get your 5th year MBA and then join core, but that's definitely not the majority. If you are interested in getting an MBA later in your career, there's definitely like Comcast has financial assistance, and the program that I was in at MLP, we actually got some MBA credits from here at Villanova from the classes that the professors, like Dr. West taught us. So, you know, it definitely could be valuable. I think a lot of times in a finance career, it's more valuable after you have work experience, because you really can then apply what you're learning. But for entry level, not as important.
So at BASF in their accounting PEP program, there is an expectation that you will sit and study for the CPA exam and that you will become a CPA. So I've completed that aspect, and the experience that you get at BASF fulfills your experience requirements. So it is worth sitting down and taking the actual test for. In terms of MBAs, right off the bat, I mean, coming out of the program, you know, they know you're coming out of school for the most part, so it's not an early expectation, but later on, it is expected that you will go back and also go for an MBA. BASF pays 100% for MBAs, and they reimburse the cost for your CPA as well. So it's not a cost that you have to bear as much as the time commitment and the energy that you have to put forth into it. But what I've noticed is they publish weekly, or maybe even sometimes more often, job position transitions within the organization, and there's very few people who work at BASF who are transitioning at even a slightly higher level who don't have MBAs. So it's highly encouraged and almost become a job qualification to move up and move into your next role.
So at JP Morgan in the audit department, it's a requirement that you get certified within the first 2 years, and I think it's more about driving your own career and what you want to do, whether it's a Series 7, a CFA, a CAMS, a CPA. I personally have a CPA, and any interview I go on is brought up. So I think it gives you a leg up from your peers and on job interviews. And also I know we have tuition reimbursement, so I know that's important, and one of my colleagues are really utilizing that.
Yeah, we won't get into all the benefits issues, but there's definitely more benefits, for example, in a corporation than in public accounting by a long shot, if you will. And I'll just sort of leave it at that. You'll find out those things if you're interested in that kind of thing. I do want to leave time for questions if you want to ask some, but I just thought, informally, I'd just say, could you talk about one challenge you've had in your present job, or if you had a real interesting challenge in a previous rotation or something that could do, just to give students an idea of some of the things you might encounter. And again, we can go in any order at all. If you had something interesting you want to share with us, just fire away.
So in Sikorsky, we recently, I would say, the overall business is facing some of its own challenges, being that it's a heavily military business. So, with the overall government, cutting back on budget, sequestration, what we're seeing a lot more pressure on the military side of the house. So certainly working through those types of challenges, working with the organization to set kind of realistic plan targets for 1, 2 years, even 5 years out is a big challenge. On the commercial side of the house, which is where I've spent a lot of my time, what I've seen is that as the business on the military side starts to kind of decline, what they're really expecting, what they're pushing hard on, is for the commercial side of the business to pick up. So it's that overall balanced portfolio that UTC really tries to drive in its organization. So that has put a lot of pressure on the commercial side of the business, which thankfully has been picking up, to really overdrive and to kind of make up for some of the revenue loss, profit loss on the other side of the business. So again, it's big focus, but your corporations or your businesses that you work in, there's a lot of different challenges that they'll face, and kind of the economics that are happening in the world around you definitely has an impact on the business that you'll be working in.
So I'll answer the question, I guess, a little bit more about a day-to-day type challenge. And because I work in the restructuring distressed space, a lot of times we're working with imperfect data. And we work, people in my group both work, going out to client sites, working for the companies themselves, and some of the roles that I was involved in that I spoke about earlier, representing lending institutions and things like that who lent money to a distressed company. What you'll find is a lot of times the data is imperfect. And it's a little bit different than, in your accounting and finance textbooks where there's always kind of a clear solution, and when you read the answer you say, okay, I get it. In the real world a lot of times that doesn't happen. And I think, the most important thing that you need to have, or the skill that you need to develop to address those challenges, are critical thinking skills, which I think that, I'm a Villanova alum. I think generally Villanova alums are very well versed in those types of things, and classes here prepared us well. But that's something that I think to keep in mind, as you progress throughout your career. That one of the most important things to do, skills to have are really critical thinking skills. No matter what the task is.
Fortunately for me, I get to work with a lot of people in different disciplines, not just finance. So I work with, like I mentioned before, sales. I work with technology people. I work with legal almost every day. We negotiate contracts. We do all kinds of stuff. And recently, they pulled some of our technical people out of our specific group and to align them with the cable technical group. So it's just been really interesting. We're still really figuring out what is our role versus what is their role. When we negotiate contracts, are we the lead or they the lead? So it's just, I guess it's just one of our challenges that we're working through, because you have to figure out how to work with folks other than finance and accounting functions, and you sort of learn as you go. But it's just something, like I said, we're working through right now and trying to figure out sort of whose roles are what. But working with sales folks is actually pretty interesting too, so I could probably have stories about that. But there's a ton of challenges every day.
So, especially being kind of early on the career side, most of my challenges I try and look at it with a different mindset and say, I don't think it should be a challenge, it's an opportunity. So for instance, in this past role that I had, I joined a group that was short a few people, and I was reporting directly to a director. So this director had a ton of other things that he had going on, and my first day, he kind of sat down with me, he's like, this is what I need you to work on, and yeah, here's your project, take it and run. So I kind of remember going back to my desk and thinking, I'm not really sure where I'm going to start with this, but okay. And I started asking other people in the group, and you start asking questions, and I think one of the challenges that we all face is how much communication do you provide the people that you work with intimately? Like, did I really need to tell that director the day-to-day things that I was working on to accomplish this project? No, he doesn't have time for that. So I think one of the important and harder things coming out of school is just balancing your time and learning who to lean on and who the appropriate, in sort of a hierarchy terms, person to go to with questions is. And I was really curious. I actually got feedback from him today because this is my last day in his group. And I asked him, I was like, would you have preferred that I gave you more? Because I really kind of stayed away from him unless he asked me questions or if I had something important to tell him. And he was like, no, if I have to micromanage my people and hold their hands, we have a problem. And that means that it's just extra stress on my plate. So if you can be self-serving and go out there and come up with not just find problems, you're always going to find problems and identify new things that are going on, but if you identify the problem and come up with a solution to a meeting, it's much more value than if you just show up saying, hey, we have this issue, and you're waiting for someone to kind of hold your hand and show you how to solve it. So get out there. I'm sure you guys will be fine. Critical thinkers, they'll know that works out.
So more from a macro level, I think one of the challenges we have is the non-regulatory scrutiny. I always say I can't wait for the week where we don't show up on CNN.com. And then I guess on a micro level, one of the challenges I experience day to day is kind of building relationships with people while sometimes telling them they're wrong or they're doing something incorrectly. I think that's the kind of conversation you just kind of have to work through and build up to as you kind of gain more experience in your career.
I'm married to one of these people. No, you guess no. My wife is a CFO for a company with 35 or 40 years of experience where I've been out there a little while. I'm going to bring up something that I never would have thought of as a college student. And I'm just going to ask you guys, we have 2 to 10 years experience out there. Have any of you ever run a meeting?
Yeah.
Even in 2 years, somebody said she ran a meeting. My wife, if I said, what's her job description right now? She's in meetings. I mean, now Carlisle can just bought her company out, so they're crazy. You know, there's people losing jobs, right? I mean, it's wild and crazy, but it turns out she hates. She'll come home at night, she'll tell me the waste of a meeting. That's the first thing out of her mouth. Learn how to run a meeting. You're in tons of groups. Occasionally you're in charge. As students, you never know who's in charge because you're all sort of equal. But meetings have objectives. When you leave that meeting, there should be deliverables, there should be things. And I don't know if that's anything we ever mention in college, but you learn it real quickly because you'll be at meetings and say, what did we just accomplish there? I mean, why did we even meet sometimes, you wonder, you know? And so it turns out there's little things like that. I think they all brought up like self-started. There were several really subtle but really important things mentioned by this group, which I think is really interesting because they're part of that soft skill stuff they're talking about that is unbelievably important. And you look like a jerk. If you hold a meeting with people like my wife and we got nowhere, believe me, she has an impression of you, and you know she can't help but have one. So that's the kind of thing you have interaction with some big time people sometimes at meetings. So do it well. Whatever you do, it's nice. Do it well. I could turn it over to you guys now and see if you have any. I have a couple other questions, but I don't want to leave us with absolutely no time, just in case it spurred you. We have 6 minutes now. Why don't I turn it over to you, and I'll fill space if we need it, but do any of you have any questions? It can be addressed to a specific panelist, or you could say, could you all respond if you like, but maybe something that one person said here you'd like a little follow-up with or something like that. Anyone like to ask a question? You'll have to speak up fairly loudly though, so we can all hear you. Yes?
This question's for David, I guess. You mentioned that like you start out as a generalist and then when you first start out, when do people normally start making decisions as to like what industry they want to specialize in?
I think there's really sometimes two type of decisions that you need to make in my group. One is industry and one is product. And I think that's a good question. It's a hard question to answer. I think that preliminarily, around 4, 5, 6 years, you've probably had the opportunity to work on a bunch of different engagements. And at that point, you probably have opinions on, I like these ones more than others. And, and I'm kind of at that point now where I've worked on a few different types of what I'll call product engagements. And what I mean by that is representing different types of clients. And so I like one type of work more than kind of other stuff I've done. So I've expressed to my staffers that I would like to work on more of those types of projects. And so I think around 4, 5, 6 years, it's kind of, okay, I'd like to try doing more of this type of stuff, but maybe not all of my time. And then when you start to get up near the, in my group, the highest title, senior managing director level, when one of your primary responsibilities is bringing in work, that's really kind of the point, and maybe the level directly beneath that, where it's very helpful to have an industry focus.
Others? Yes.
This question's for Katie. How did you feel in your role transitioning from public accounting into the private sector? I guess, were you doing anything different than your colleagues, and how did you just find that transition?
That's such a good question because people always ask me that also, like, would you go straight into corporate finance today versus public accounting? So it's like very similar, I think, on the lines. It's very different. So public accounting, you learn a lot. You are auditing historical financials. You work a ton of hours. You learn about all these different companies, and I had a great experience. I won't take that away. The transition, though, to then from public accounting into the corporate finance role, I was, like I said, I joined internal audit because that's what they felt I was qualified to do, right? I could go into internal audit, now you audit, more internal controls, there's a little bit more operations, and from there you can move into the business. But it's definitely a different transition because you're going from auditing financials to, if you want a corporate finance role, you have to know a little bit more about how to run a business, how you look at things. It's a little bit more like analysis, modeling, data pulling. It's a whole different job. Once you have that base and you really know, you can read financials, you can do anything. So my thing is, you could go straight into a corporate finance role like Comcast, and it's such great opportunities. You don't need to do a public accounting to come over to Comcast and have great opportunities. But you also can learn great things in public accounting that are transferable. So, the transition, it was good because I was looking for something else. I was looking for more. But it depends on what you're looking for and your career goals.
So if I could chime in, I actually spent 3 years in public accounting before moving to internal audit. I think there were some great things about public accounting, but it's interesting to see now. I have almost 7 years experience, and Lauren in our group actually started the GAN program. And even though I had all those great experiences in public accounting, she actually has 4 or 5 years of networking at JP Morgan. So whenever I have a question for somebody, I can ask her, hey, I have this question, do you know the person to go to? She'll be like, yeah, I have a really good relationship with that person and things of that nature. So I know that the public accounting firms are great, but I think that there are also great opportunities in internal as well.
You don't have to do a public accounting role to get a really great corporate finance role. And I didn't know that. Candidly, when I was a student, what do finance majors do? You have to work at a trading desk or you have to get your Series 7. Well, that's none of the roles that at Comcast. There's so many different roles, whether it's being an analyst or working in a strategy group or working in FP&A doing budgeting and forecasting at so many different organizations, such as everywhere from a business unit where you can work at the theme parks in Orlando or film in LA or in headquarters, corporate finance. There's so many other things that I just didn't have a perspective on. And I know Comcast at the time when I was graduating 10 years ago didn't even have these programs in place, but they really put in the time and effort to really culture professional development, which I know a lot of the organizations have done, which is really great.
Well, we have hit 7 o'clock, and we do want time for the folks, including folks that aren't sitting on the panel, to speak with you guys if you want to go out there and have a little food and that kind of thing. But I just want to thank the panel so much for sharing their experiences with us and give us a better idea of what the life of corporate finance